Welcome to Next on the Tee with Chris Mascaro, the show where you get the inside access to the best minds in the game. Each week, Chris has the privilege of chatting with top instructors, legendary players, course architects, and industry insiders. If you're looking to improve your game, gain a new perspective, or just hear some incredible golf stories, you are indeed in the right place.
You see, Chris, let me tell you something, I haven't spoken to a press man in my life that is knowledgeable, seriously, as you are. Never.
You do such a great job. It kind of makes me feel good all of a sudden.
You do so much for the game. You're so kind to all of us that are out there in the game. You know, we need more people like you in the game of golf.
Thank you for pressing play. Now, grab your clubs, step up to the tee, and let's get started. This is Next on the Tee.
Hi, folks, and thank you for coming back and joining me here on Next on the Tee, where golf legends live and the game gets better. I'm your host, Chris Mascaro, and a huge dose of vitamin G goes out to all of you for being here and spending your time with my guests and I this week. It's a huge privilege to say that you're here, and I thank you so very much. In exchange for your time, I've got a trio of wonderful friends that we're going to have a great time with on this episode. They've got great stories and insights. They're going to take you inside the mind of tour players, a couple of former tour players on this show. You'll hear why new PGA champion Aaron Rai is, as one of my guests says, the perfect champion for the times that we're in, bringing civility to an increasingly crass sports scene. You'll hear why he has that take. Plus, how being a major champion doesn't always mean that much on the PGA Tour Champions, quote-unquote, doesn't guarantee you a spot, or over on the European Legends Tour either, apparently. So you'll hear all about that as well. So who exactly is it that I get the privilege of sharing with you on this, and you get to hear all of these takes and a whole lot more? Well, I got the privilege of kicking off this episode with a guy who is in 4 Hall of Fames, including the Canadian Golf and BC Sports Hall of Fames, a guy who helped BYU win a national championship. He won the Canadian Amateur and the Canadian PGA Championship, plus the 1992 Greater Milwaukee Open. That is, of course, Richard Zokol. Zok and I talk about his new book, Zokology, Change Your Perspective, Not Your Swing. You're going to hear tips from the right thought protocol that we should have when the pressure gets dialed up on us, why having a reliable pre-shot routine is really going to help you when that pressure is on. You'll also hear the story of how another Canadian legend and a runner-up at the 1969 Masters, George Knudson, told Richard that being excited about getting his tour card and making it out on the PGA Tour wasn't a good thing. And then what we can all learn from Jack Nicklaus's view of golf being a game. A wonderful story that Jack had with his biographer, Ken Bowden, immediately following the Duel in the Sun. I think you'll enjoy that one as well. Following Zok, I get a return visit from a guy who has become a cherished friend, a guy who is also a Western Pennsylvania Golf Association Hall of Famer. There's a theme brewing here. And a guy who, in my opinion, is the greatest golf writer of this or any other time, and that is Ron Sirak. Ron was also given the Lifetime Achievement Award in Journalism by the PGA of America, so you can sense that I'm not the only person who thinks Ron's great. During this segment, Ron and I bemoan the loss of the CBS radio network after 99 years. How sad that we've lost that network. I get his thoughts on the Mike Vrabel and Diana Russini situation and the similarities to the mistakes that were made by Tiger Woods and his team around all of his scandals. From there, we reflect on the PGA Championship and Aaron Rai's huge win, concerns over leadership at the PGA of America as well. We get into that topic. And then what the LPGA Tour needs to do now that the purses over on that tour are way up, but the ratings continue to trend down, and the advice that he would give LPGA Tour Commissioner Craig Kessler. Then I round out the show with a guy who reaches a milestone, his 40th appearance with me here on Next on the Tee, and that is 2003 PGA champion Shaun Micheel. As a former PGA champion, Shaun played in this year's PGA Championship up at Aronimink. First, he takes us inside the Champions Dinner, right? A place that we'd all love to be a fly on the wall for. We'll hear about the dinner that Scotty set up for them. We'll also hear what it takes to play some of those long holes. Did you see how the distances were on some of these holes, particularly on the back nine? like the par 4 15th that played 542 yards. If that's not a hint and a half for why the golf ball needs to be rolled back, I don't know what is. You also hear more about how hard it is to get out onto the Champions Tour, right? To get a spot out there. We talk a little bit about that with some of my previous guests over the last few weeks. Here we'll talk about it with Sean as well. Again, as a guy who is a major champion, you can't get out onto the PGA Tour champions. We'll hear about that. You'll also hear the passion in Sean's voice for how much he loves the game, how much he loves to compete, but how hard it is to find a place for him to go out and compete. It's not just on the PGA Tour Champions. He's also having a difficult time finding a spot over on the European Legends Tour. You'll hear about that and why. Look, Sean is great. I know you're really going to enjoy him and all of his stories and his insights as well. So, folks, great show on tap for you. Thank you again for being here and taking the journey with me. As I've been saying over the last several episodes, one last thing before we get started. If you would please do me a huge favor, wherever you're listening to this show now, if you would take just a couple of seconds and subscribe to it, and if you have an opportunity to also rate the show, you know how huge the algorithms are nowadays. Your interaction with rating the show and subscribing to it is going to go a long way to getting the show in front of more wonderful golf enthusiasts just like you. Okay, folks, but before we get into this week's show, just like I did last week, I love spotlighting small businesses that are doing great things. And like I talked about last week, a couple of Pittsburgh area companies are doing great things. I found them by looking at the 2025 Best of Pittsburgh Awards. Now, keep in mind, again, they didn't contact me. I reached out to them. They sent me some samples, and I got hooked with what they have to offer. So, look, like I mentioned, I'm a huge hot sauce fan. Love hot sauces. And I love trying different things and finding the perfect balance. The ones that have great flavor combined with big heat. Now, we see so many of them that are just all heat and no flavor. That's not what I found when I tried Artie's hot sauce. A lot of hot sauces, like I say, just don't have the taste that I'm looking for. But Artie found the sweet spot. Their sauces bring plenty of flavor from the first bite all the way through to whatever it is you're eating. I've tried them on wings, tacos, burgers, eggs, pizza, just about anything I'll put hot sauce on, and I love what Artie has brought to the table. Give them a follow, give them a try, look at them online. You can find them at artieshotsauce.com. Another company that's doing it right is the Steel City Salt Company. They've got some wonderful spice blends and seasonings that are just perfect for anything that you might want to give it a try on, whether it's on steak, whether it's on chicken, on salmon, on your vegetables, on your pasta. Folks, I put Pittsburgh's Little Italy, that's the name of one of their spice blends, on pasta this past weekend. Knock your socks off. I can't say enough great things about them. I hope you'll go check them out online at steelcitysalt.com. All of their wonderful blends, and they sent me several of them, are just absolutely delicious. You're going to love them on just about anything you sprinkle them on. So go out there, check them out online, give them a try, and again, let me know what you think about both companies. I'd really love your feedback. Again, artieshotsauce.com, steelcitysalt.com. Let me know what your thoughts are, whether you go give me a comment on our website, nextonthetee.net, or you go to @CTMascaro on Instagram or Twitter. Give me a comment. I'd appreciate hearing back what you think about both companies. You know I also have a huge dose of vitamin G for everybody over at the Pittsburgh Tribune Review and TribLive.com. TribLive.com is the leading news website in Western Pennsylvania, with news around the clock, Pittsburgh pro sports coverage, a high school sports network, and a podcast network, which is where you can find Next on the Tee. Bookmark TribLive.com or download the TribLive app for free and stay up to date with the latest news from Western Pennsylvania and beyond. I also want to talk about our friends over at the Pittsburgh Brewing Company and Iron City Beer, a brand that I have loved my whole life and started drinking when I was 21 years old, of course. Whether you're a hacker or a scratcher, the secret to a successful day on the links is knowing when it's time to grab an iron, even if that means keeping it in the bag till the 19th hole. If it's been a while since you've reached for Pittsburgh staple beer, it's time to revisit Iron City. Thanks to their incredible new facility in Creighton, the best-tasting Iron City beer ever made is now available at a course near you. Iron City pairs well with any lie and sky and serves as a friendly reminder that there's always next round. Check out all of their wonderful beers and their gift shop by going online to pittsburghbrewing.com. All right, now back with me is a two-time winner out on the PGA Tour, 1981 BYU National Champion, 1981 Canadian Amateur Champion, and a four-time Hall of Fame inductee, and that is Richard Zokol. Richard has been a wonderful guest and friend over the years of this show. His new book, Zokology, Change Your Perspective, Not Your Swing, is about to come out, and he's about to tell us all about it. But Richard has just been an instrumental part of the show. This is his 10th appearance with me, and I couldn't be more blessed to say that, and to say that I get to spend more time with him this week here on Next on the Tee. Hey, Richard, how are you, my friend?
I'm great, Chris. Always good to be with you, my friend, and looking forward to our chat today.
All right, so let's jump right in, Richard. Let's get into the new book. Again, it is called Zokology, Change Your Perspective, Not Your Swing. What are we going to learn when we go out and pick up our copy?
Well, just as you could guess on the title, Zokology, Change Your Perspective, Not Your Swing, is all about more so on the psychology and what I learned in my challenges when I got onto the PGA Tour and had a very poor perspective, or I guess I hadn't learned how to think properly. And when people are left to their own devices to think, there's no manual in this game, as you know, Chris, and not too many. Most teachers teach golf swing, so if you don't know how to think properly, quite often us go down rabbit holes. We without even knowing it, we condition ourselves to become emotionally attached to the result and what those results might mean. It's really simple. I often use this example. Let's take these two golfers. They happen to be the best players in the world. One golfer is called Rory. The other golfer who's the best in the world is called Scotty. And it was only a year and a half ago when before Rory won the Masters to get that elusive career Grand Slam, and we watched him struggle for 10 years. And it was really quite astonishing for a player of his level to not have won a major, and he let 3 of them slip through his fingers. And then he finally won it in 2025, and he damn near lost it 3 times in the final round, up the first tee and then chipping it into the 13th hole and then having a wedge into the last hole, only needing for a par to win. And he didn't do it. So until he beat Justin Rose in the playoff. And then it allowed him to take this pressure off his shoulders. He won the 2026 Masters, and he's off like a shot. But he had to get over this psychological perspective that held him back for 10 years. And then when we look at a guy like Scotty Scheffler, who inherently, because of, I think, his family and his ecosystems that he grew up in, his personal identity didn't change when he won a major or when he makes tens of millions or hundreds of millions of dollars. And we think of him as an anomaly, because most people left unchallenged go down some pretty bad rabbit holes, and there's very few people that their ecosystem has helped them to have a proper perspective. So I had to learn all that stuff. I write about it in the book called Zokology.
All right, so let's expand on that a little bit, Richard, because you've talked on this show, and you do it again in your book, about the thought protocol that you utilized to get you through when the pressure was on and you were facing adversity. Walk us through the protocol. What did you do?
Well, basically, I struggled first and foremost when I got onto the PGA Tour and was very anxious and very young, and it was a Cinderella story getting into BYU as a walk-on and then winning the Canadian Amateur. And my first try at the PGA Tour school, I got through it, and then I was thrust out there as a young 22-year-old, and my hyperactive mind, because I got to do this, I've got to do that. And it just stopped me from being able to perform. I was consumed with poor thoughts and anxious thoughts. So basically what I had to do was learn, and it took some, 10 years, if not more, to slowly get out of this process, to learn how to detach emotionally from the extrinsic results. So basically in that, I created a system, a performance measurement system called Mind Track Golf. So to simplify what mind track golf is and to get into a proper perspective, you really need to simplify every shot down to two things. There's only two key performance markers in every shot. It doesn't matter if it's a tee shot or a putt or a chip or a bunker shot. Is you need to make an assessment of that shot, and then you must execute on that assessment. The assessment is the club, the lie, the distance, the wind, and what's going to lead to the decisions you're going to make, the type of shot you're going to make. And then you have, once you decide what your decisions on what type of shot you're going to make, then you have to you're going to make some decisions. And then once you make your decisions, you're going to execute that shot the best you can. Then there's a system of evaluation. So you grade your key performance marker, your assessment, into three ways: excellent, satisfactory, or unsatisfactory. Then you grade your execution: excellent, satisfactory, or unsatisfactory. And this is what you focus on. And what happens when you do this, it slowly detaches you from the extrinsic result, what the shot may mean. And what happens is when we condition ourselves, it takes us time to condition ourselves on the results. And, we watched people like Brooks Koepka last week talk about not caring in order to care. So we have to be very careful when we use our vocabulary. And it's not really, it's crazy to think that you have to detach yourself from caring. You care about the shot. That's why you have a problem, is you care about it. But what you're learning to do is detach emotionally from the extrinsic result, the score or the outcome. And then this process reattaches you to your intrinsic motivation, which is your assessing and executing. And then you take that to the golf course. You do the best you can with every shot. And with each shot, you reboot and do it again. So it changes your performance measurement system, and it shifts it onto the assessment and the execution of the shot. And you learn to detach from the emotional attachment to the extrinsic results, like what the score may mean to you. And you just keep doing it over and over again until you recondition yourself out. That's why you need the app to work with. So it's the tool that allows you to change your perspective.
So, Richard, there's two things that come to mind as you talk through those things. One, it seems like if you're doing that at your level, mm-hmm. right, you can't be a leaderboard watcher or scoreboard watcher, because at that point, you've kind of ruined the whole premise of the whole thing, right? Because now you're just worrying about score.
Not quite. So at the start, like when I finished second in the '88 Hawaiian Open, I went out that day, and prior to that, my mind hadn't readapted. So when I looked at the score, I got too excited. It caused me to get a little too intense, and I wouldn't be able to perform. So you got to get to a point where you're comfortable enough in walking the gauntlet. I call walking the gauntlet being in contention on Sunday of winning. And if you're not comfortable there, you will have a hard time performing. So the more times you get into the position of walking the gauntlet, the more comfortable you get. Can you imagine how Jack feels comfortable within the lead when he was in his prime, or Tiger, or all the great players? Well, us mere mortals on the PGA Tour, when you only won a few times, when you get in there, you need to feel comfortable, and it takes experience to feel comfortable when around the lead or in the lead. So the more you do this, the more comfortable you feel, and the more comfortable you feel, it increases the chances that you're going to perform well under those tight, very difficult circumstances.
One of the things we amateurs are not good at is committing to the shot. That was the other thing that I sort of was reading into, the things that you were saying. We tend to look at a shot, we kind of get it in our minds, but then we get a little scared, or something along those lines. We'll decel, whether it's the putter, or even if we've got a wedge or another club in our hands, we'll decelerate it, and the next thing you know, the ball goes crazy places. So committing to the shot and kind of believing in it, is that another piece to that sort of protocol you've got to have once you step over the ball?
Yes. Committing to the shot is very important. But I think, and again, along these lines in vocabulary, we often hear the player say to the player, commit to the shot, commit to the shot. It's very important to commit to the shot. But once you commit to the shot, it doesn't mean you're going to perform well. So I like to, the advice I would give a player if I was a caddy is commit to the shot. Okay, now perform. Because committing to the shot is different than making an excellent execution. I think you need the commitment in order to be consistent with excellent executions, but it doesn't guarantee it. So in the book, I explain how you have to commit to the shot, then you must perform. And I think that's the missing key that a lot of people still need to do. Because remember, just because you commit to it doesn't mean it doesn't guarantee you're going to perform.
We all can relate to that
commitment.
Your friend Jim Nelford, who was one of your teammates at BYU and a guy that you played on tour with, and you're both in the Canadian Golf Hall of Fame, he wrote a review about your book. And what he said in it is that if you don't have a plan and a reliable pre-shot routine, that means you're not going to be on tour for very long. Talk about that and why those two things are so important to help you deal with the crushing pressure of playing out on the PGA Tour.
Certainly. And people get confused. They talk about pre-shot routine and shot routine. They're two different things. My definition of the pre-shot routine is firstly getting into your shot, doing the assessment, get the yardage, find out the wind, look at what your lie is, determine what type of shot you're going to hit, what the ball's going to do when it hits the ground. Is it going to run or is it going to suck back, depending on how firm the grass is? And then once you go through your assessment, you decide, well, I'm going to hit this shot right here, and then I'm going to commit to it. Then you enter your shot routine. And the shot routine is what gets you through the most difficult situations on the golf course. You practice your shot routine. You can change your shot routine from time to time. And I highly recommend you make your shot routine as short as possible, around 10 or 15 seconds. When I watched Rory fluctuates his shot routine off the tee way too much. He gives it sometimes 6, 7, 8, up to 9 looks per shot. And then when you look at Justin Rose, he's a 1-look guy. So what happens is when you rely on your shot routine, then you have a system that gets you through it. I remember the most pressure I ever felt at this particular time was it during in the final round of the U.S. Open in 1992 at Pebble Beach. I'm playing with Paul Azinger, and I remember, we were in contention in the lead on Sunday, and Ron Reed, the gentleman from the USGA, says to me, Richard, we're coming out of commercial in 45 seconds, and I'll call you to the tee. Well, in that moment right there, I went into the scoring tent, and I started to hyperventilate, and I said to myself, okay, this is what your routine is all about. So I got my breathing under control. I came out, and keep in mind, very excited in that stimulated moment. He goes on the tee from Vancouver, British Columbia. Please welcome Richard Zokol. I pull up my 2-iron. I step up to the tee. I trusted my routine. I went through. I committed to the shot, and I made an excellent. I performed excellently on my routine and hit the most perfect 2-iron down the middle of the fairway. So those routines, I highly recommend, because if you don't have a routine, this situation will overwhelm most players. So practice a routine, work with your PGA Tour instructor, PGA Tour coach, PGA coach, and learn a specific routine, make it rhythmic, make it short, make it tight, and then rely on it when you're on the golf course.
George Knudson, a fellow Canadian golfer and Hall of Famer, a guy who finished second in the 69 Masters. He asked you how you felt after getting through Q school and earning your tour card, and you told him how excited you were, and he said, don't be excited. It can only hurt you. What did he mean by that?
Well, at the time, I had no idea what he meant by that. But 10 years on tour, spinning my tires, and most of that time, Chris, I knew exactly what he meant. And that's, and that is when you're excited, anxiety is, anxious is a form of anxiety, and stimulate being stimulated increases your ability to perform quite often. So you don't want to get, stress is okay. You learn that stress, you can perform at a high rate. But once it turns into anxiety is a very different thing than stress. Anxiety causes you to fail, and it disrupts your ability to assess and execute shots on the golf course. We've all been overwhelmed from time to time via anxiety. So in order to manage that, that's what you have your pre-shot routine and your shot routine to help you get through in those moments.
And tournament pressure isn't just for tour pros. I mean, we all feel pressure, whether we're playing in our club championship or we're just trying to beat our buddies on the weekend. And, Richard, I remember Ken Bowden, who was an author who wrote several books about Jack Nicklaus. And shortly after the final round of the 77 Open, that famous duel in the sun between Jack and Tom Watson, Ken had plans to have dinner with Jack and Barbara, and he approached Jack and said something along the lines of, I guess you'll just want to have dinner alone with Barbara. And Jack said, heavens, Ken, it's just a game. Of course we'll have dinner. To me, that's something that we should all learn from.
Yes. And you know what that is? He's got a proper perspective. He doesn't let the situation. I mean, Jack was the all-time best. He's won more majors, and he's gotten more comfortable. Him and Tiger have gotten more comfortable than anyone else playing in major championships in and around the lead than anyone else. So, he knows his perspective is the most healthiest. The problem with a lot of players is that if they haven't gotten to the point where they feel comfortable in the final rounds, walking the gauntlet, they will struggle. And it takes them numerous times to be in that situation before they learn to get comfortable, which allows themselves to perform their best. And that, it's kind of like you got to be around, if you take Tom Kite, he was around the lead so much time that he wasn't able to convert into wins at the percentage rate when Jack got into walking the gauntlet in major championships. Tom's only got one major. But that's what you have to do when you get into those positions. You need to learn to get comfortable, and then you'll be able to increase those chances that you're going to be successful in those situations.
And we'll be right back. In golf, fast isn't a nice to have, fast is a necessity, and speed off the tee is where it all starts. That was precisely the thinking behind the all-new QI4D family of drivers from TaylorMade. Our fastest, most fittable drivers, built to meet the demands of the world's best players like Scottie Scheffler, Rory McIlroy, Nelly Korda, and the rest of Team TaylorMade. The QI4D lineup was engineered to unlock the 4 dimensions of speed, starting with a multi-material driver head with enhanced aerodynamic shaping, combined with a faster face and our revolutionary React shaft system. The TaylorMade QI4D drivers are ready to extract every bit of speed from every golfer's unique swing profile. Our industry-leading adjustability and fitting unlocks it all. Watch the full story of QI4D, our quest to build the fastest, most fittable drivers, and unlock your newfound speed at TaylorMadeGolf.com/findingfast. You guys know what a fan I am of On Point Golf. Folks, get the #1 ball marker in the game of golf. On Point is the only 3-dimensional ball marker with alignment technology and a removable coin. It is approved for use according to the rules of golf as defined by the USGA and the R&A. As we all know, putting is all about line and pace. Mark your ball with On Point, engage with your 3-dimensional ball marker, and have more confidence in your line, execute the putt, and lower your scores. Folks, with the likes of Jim Furyk, PGA professionals and amateurs alike out there using them now, it's the #1 ball marker in golf that actually helps you lower your scores. Go online to onpointgolf.us, read about the science behind it, then put one in your bag and make more putts. I feel like it's the 15th club in my bag. It's helped my game. Why wouldn't you let On Point help yours as well? Again, onpointgolf.us. Check them out and get one in your bag today.
PGA Tour Superstore pros aren't born. They're made. Every January, hundreds of associates talk to the top manufacturers, learn about the latest clubs, test the newest equipment, log thousands of hours of training, and together hit over 100,000 balls, all so they can get you the perfect fit.
Now let's get back to the show. And Richard, along those same lines, you also say in the book, the process you outline can help us not just when we're off track on the golf course, but also in life. How can we apply this in everyday life?
Well, first of all, you have to have an awareness. I highly recommend learning how to meditate. You have to have a situational awareness about you. You need to understand that when you're in those situations, that you can rely on something like your pre-shot routine when you're golfing. So some form of breathing technique, and understand that you have your system will get you through those, and you rely on these breathing techniques. I had this routine, or my mantra that I had: I am I, here and now. We listened to Cameron Young talk about this new when he won the Players Championship, how he was trying to stay present, not when he was hitting the shot, but when he was walking the fairway, and he'd look down, I am here where my feet are. And I think Dr. Brett McCabe taught him that. I think it's brilliant, because even when you're walking between those shots, you have to have a calmness about you. You've got to incorporate a breath, because the situation causes anxiety to get so stimulated, and when you're not ready for it. So that's the only way how you're going to learn how to be in those positions, those situations, and then have a system that gets you through. You got your system, your assessment, and your execution, and your pre-shot and your shot routine. But you also have to have that when you're walking the fairways, because you're spending more time walking the fairways and dealing with, a high heart rate, and you need to keep yourself contained.
Richard, you alluded to this a little bit ago, talking about your time getting through Q School, and that's one of the biggest pressure cookers there is. You did it in 1981, and in that class that you were with was Hal Sutton, Paul Azinger, Larry Mize, Kenny Knox, Steve Jones, Rocky Thompson, Lance Tenbreck, Tommy Armour III. So many great players were in that class with you. What was it like? Because, again, that is, as I've talked to so many of your peers, one of the most pressure-packed 5, 6, 7 days of their lives. What was it like for you trying to get your tour card playing up against those guys?
Well, I had, being so young and right out of BYU, and having won the Canadian Amateur, and we won the NCAA, and rooming with Clampett, I got through it just through sheer naivety. I made it right on the number. But, one of the things I explained in the book is I lost my card 5 times, my exempt status 5 times, and I got through the PGA Tour qualifying school 5 times. And before in my first 10 years, and then won twice in 1992. It was hell. And, some of those stories were, on the 18th hole on PGA West, when I was being overwhelmed by these horrible thoughts, and I finally broke through the wall. I explain it very intimately, how I got comfortably numb. And I just said to myself, I am not going to take this anymore. If this is what golf's all about, I don't want any part of it, because I hated what I was feeling and the thoughts I was running through my mind. And I just said, to hell with it. I instead of trying to play safe, which was putting me in a bad position, I said, I'm going down swinging. I don't care. I pulled out my 5-iron and shot at the pin. And I said, I don't care if the ball goes in the hole, or I don't care if it goes in the water. And then I finally let go. You got to break through that wall somehow. And I explained how I did it on a couple of occasions. I remember in Atlanta, my lowest round ever, I shot 63. Furman Fisher came out to watch me because I was on 59 watch. And that round started with the yips. And then I broke through one of those moments again, broke through the wall, got comfortably numb, and then I made 10 birdies in the next 13 holes before stumbling on 16 and 17. But those are the learning experience, and you have to gain your awareness when you're there or approaching them, because, Jordan Spieth, he's struggling. Something is missing, and I think it's something in his attitude. He's still connected to wanting it so badly, and the harder he pushes, the more he pushes it away. So these are the breakthroughs that we talk about in Zokology. And this is the perspective, is you've got to change your perspective, not your golf swing.
Yeah, so let's take that a step further, Richard, because to your point, I mean, on some level, the game has to be fun, right? I mean, you don't go out there to, struggle through it and all the things that the game can do to you and how it can humble you. If you're not out there to have some fun, and it just would become a drudgery. And you, to your point, you just want to take your clubs and go home and forget and go do something else, wouldn't you?
Yes, yeah, absolutely. With a bad perspective, you become emotionally incarcerated out there and you lose your freedom to play. And that's just what happens. So when you learn to detach emotionally from these extrinsic results, what it might mean, or, one way or the other, money's going to make you rich, but it won't make you happy, you've got to learn to detach emotionally from that. So we tell you the method how to do that. And then you've got to reattach your emotional connection to your key performance markers, the assessing and executing. And this is what Scotty does inherently so beautiful. He lets go. He doesn't allow his personal identity to become something that he's not. And this is what gives you your freedom. Now, we all know how we played freedom when we were a kid. We watch a lot of players talk about, well, I just want to be a kid again. Well, they're right. They're on the right track, but you can't do it unless you have a system that pulls you into the present moment. And that's when you're in that present moment, that's what gives you your freedom to play it at the level you want.
Richard, you're imparting so much wonderful wisdom on us in this book and the things that you went through and how you coped and how you, as you just said, broke through. But all of these things, right, they're coming from an older adult. I know what it's like to try to impart wisdom on my kids, right? They look at me like, you don't understand what it's like nowadays, right? That worked back in the 80s. That doesn't work nowadays. I mean, thinking about if you had an opportunity to go back and tell 22-year-old Richard Zokol what to do and how to do this thing, would you have listened if an older guy like you or me had come back with that kind of wisdom?
Well, as they say, Chris, that youth is wasted on the young.
Exactly.
and well, what I would do is I wish, because I make all these relationships with, this is going to be heaven or this is going to be hell now because of the disco dick thing I talk about, this rock and roll and music. And Tom Cochrane sang a song, Life is a Highway, and Rod Stewart sang a song about, if I wish I knew now what I know then, or something to that effect. Yes, I think as a younger player, I wish I could have grabbed hold of someone, because I only think it's in the past 10, 15 years that this whole psychological perspective and the science of psychology, particularly as it relates to the yips and golf performance, is starting to connect the dots. So this system that I created 25 years ago helped me get into the present moment. And I wish I had someone who I could lean on and mentor. They could have told me that at the start of my 20-year PGA Tour career, because the whole disco dick thing, it dove me down the psychological perspective for my whole 20 plus years on the PGA Tour. And now that I've been able to connect these dots and create this program that inherently pulls players into the present moment, I'm going to go after the NCAA programs, because, these coaches at NCAA, they get these very pliable young minds, and they're not always proper when they're, before they've developed. And they got 4 years of installation to mold these young minds, and to let them out after 4 years and enter the world. And a lot of these young kids are getting caught up in distance far too much. And there's just lots to learn before they become experts.
Richard, before I let you go, remind our listeners again, how can they go out and get a copy of the book, plus listen to your show as well?
Well, yeah. So we've started a podcast called Tough Lies, the Golfers Podcast. You can buy the book, Zokology, Change Your Perspective, Not Your Swing. Just go to any bookstore or order it on Amazon Books. It's in audio now, Tantor Media out of New York. It's published by ECW Press out of Toronto. Tantor Audio Books has got is producing it for the next 10 years. So download it, listen to it, and study it. It'll help you recondition your thoughts into the present moment.
Richard, how can we follow you online and on social media as well?
Online, you can see the website at Mindtrack Golf at mindtrackgolf.com, and there's no C in the track. And I'm on, you can reach me on X or Twitter at Richard Zokol.
Richard, it's always so much fun getting to spend time with you, my friend. It's been a blessing each and every time. Like I say, this is the 10th time around for us. I'm so grateful to you for all you've meant to me and our listeners and this show. I hope we get the privilege of catching up with you again soon.
Well, we look forward to it, Chris. You're always doing such a marvelous job, and we're happy you're having such great success with it.
I appreciate you. Take care, my friend. All the best to you and your family.
Thank you.
See you, Richard.
Bye-bye.
That's the great Richard Zokol, folks. And again, mindtrackgolf.com, T-R-A-K, again, is the spelling of that. Mindtrackgolf.com is where you can find him online. At Richard Zokol, Z-O-K-O-L, is where you can find him on social media. Again, we talk a lot about the mental side of the game on this show, right? Help you play a little better, have more fun out on the golf course. And the thing that I kind of keep getting back to as a theme of what Richard is talking about is not getting attached to the result, right? A lot of times we all sort of project, right? I need to make, if I can make 3 more pars, I'll break whatever milestone score that is, 100, 90, 80, whatever it is for you, right? If we start off playing poorly, sometimes we go in the tank. I'm not going to play well today, right? It's really kind of getting away from that. And I love the idea of grading yourself on the quality of the shot, committing to it first, right? We all, struggle committing to a shot sometimes. I think this is a hard wedge. Maybe it's an easy 9. We don't commit to it, and then we fit in or chunk it or something along those lines. Or when we're reading a putt, it kind of looks like it's going this way. We decel into it and we leave it short right. So the idea of committing to the shot, but then executing against that commitment, grading how we do and kind of detaching ourselves from score is probably the right thing for us to do to have more fun out there, right? And again, the idea of golf is to have fun. It isn't to make it a drudgery. So I love what he's doing. Again, the book is called Zokology. Change your perspective, not your swing. Go out there and check it out. You can get it on Amazon as well. Okay, coming up next is another multi-time Hall of Famer, a guy who I think is the greatest golf writer of this or any other time, and that is Ron Sirak. Before I bring Ron into the show, let me remind you about the great things going on up at Macklemore. Because this year, get ready to experience a game like never before at the Keep, the brand new Bill Bergen and Reese Jones co-designed course at Macklemore. With its challenging layout and awe-inspiring views, every round here is an unforgettable adventure. Whether you're taking on the signature holes or just soaking in the scenery, the Keep is where your best golf meets nature's finest backdrop. So grab your clubs and join us up at Macklemore. The Keep is open and it's waiting for you. And folks, if you haven't tried 2 Under yet, you really need to. Why? Well, from the first tee to the clubhouse, 2 Under's Joey Pouch is going to keep you comfortable and locked in all round or all day. Build your own bundle by going online to 2 Under, that's the number 2, UNDR.com, and save up to 20%. Okay, now back in next on the tee with me is Ron Sirak. As you guys know, Ron is one of the greatest golf writers of all time. He's from my nape of the vine up in Newcastle, Pennsylvania, which is a little bit north of Pittsburgh. He attended Franklin and Marshall College in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, where he wrote for the Lancaster Independent Press. His first job in golf was filling the pop coolers at Castle Hills Golf Course in his hometown. You know Ron's work now as a senior writer for Golf Digest and a regular contributor on the Golf Channel. He was also an executive director for Golf World. Prior to all of that, he worked for the Associated Press for 18 years, the first 7 as a supervising news editor, before becoming deputy sports editor and then a writer. He's co-authored 3 books along with Pia Nielsen and Lynn Marriott titled Every Shot Must Have a Purpose, The Game Before the Game, and Play Your Best Golf Now. He's also written a biography for young people about Greg Norman. 2015, he received the PGA of America Lifetime Achievement Award in Journalism and the Media Excellence Award from the LPGA. He also received the Lincoln Worden Journalism Award from the Metropolitan Golf Writers Association. In 2021, he was inducted into the Western Pennsylvania Golf Hall of Fame. and I could not be more thrilled that I get to spend more time with him this week here on Next on the Tee. Hey, Ron, thanks for coming back on the show.
Chris, thanks for having me on. And boy, how I wish there had been sports psychology around when I was playing high school golf.
Would it have helped you? I mean, at that age, we're all so hard-headed. Would you have paid attention?
That's a great question. I don't know, but I wrote the first book with Lynn and Pia 21 years ago, and all I kept thinking over and over again is, boy, I wish somebody had told me this when I was playing high school golf. And so much of it is it is so reduced to the basics, the simplicity of it all. Exactly what you're saying. That it's not about. And Pia says this all the time. People fall in love with playing swing. They don't play golf.
Right.
And they get obsessed with. And again, Pia once said that. If Lee Trevino came along today, there'd be a coach trying to change his swing.
Exactly.
And one of the things I love about their approach to the game is that they believe there's more than one right way to swing a golf club. The key is to make your swing repeat, particularly under pressure.
Swing your swing.
Yep.
Ron, I want to start our time together on a bit of a sad note. The CBS radio network shut down after 99 years. They cited changing audience habits, a shift in radio station programming strategies coupled with the challenging economic times as the reasons why. I feel like there's a little bit of a hidden message in there. They were the original radio network. What are your thoughts about us losing such an iconic radio network?
Yeah, I know technology changes and people get their information in different ways, but CBS Radio News was around for 99 years. When I think of it, I'm old enough that I remember Edward R. Murrow. He was not on the radio. He was on TV when I was a kid. But I believe they had 700 affiliates. They were bringing news into the homes of tens of millions of people. And it's sad that we're losing not only a voice out there, but we're losing a training ground for journalism, a role model for how to practice journalism. In my 18 years at the Associated Press, I spent about 2.5 years on the national broadcast desk there. That helped my writing so much, learning how to write broadcast copy, how to be short, concise, and still lively. And, it's a sad, sad loss for anybody who cares about journalism.
Ron, I also saw that you commented on Twitter about the mistake that Mike Vrabel and Diana Rossini are making with respect to not coming out and telling their story and being accountable. You said it's the same mistake that Tiger and his people made around his scandals. And I think we're within the same mindset with each other. Please correct me if I'm wrong. But as I've said about Tiger, and I've said the same thing about all the Major League Baseball players back during the steroid era, if you come out and say, you know what, yep, I did it, the public is very forgiving and we tend to move on. But as they say, the cover-up is always worse than the crime. Is that where you are on these situations as well?
Yeah, exactly. I call it the Richard Nixon rule. It's the cover-up's worse than the crime. It was the cover-up that brought him down. And that's something that it's a mistake they make over and over. When the Tiger scandal was happening, I was at Golf World magazine then, and my boss had me do a story where I talked to a bunch of crisis management experts about how Tiger's team was handling the whole situation. And, the one thing that they said is over and over, they all said, all six of them, what we can't control, we can give the best advice in the world. There's two things we can't control. Is our client telling us the full truth? And is they willing to take our advice? I think in Tiger's case, I don't think he told the full truth right out of the box. Just like many of those steroid people in baseball didn't tell the full truth. I think ultimately what hurt Pete Rose more than the gambling was the fact that he lied about the gambling for 15 years and didn't tell the truth about his relationship to gambling until he got a hefty book contract. So it's all about, you just got to lay it all out there. And particularly in the case of Vrabel, he came out and his first tactic was to attack the media, and sort of say, this is just a lot of hooey. There's nothing here. And then drip, drip, drip. It came out that it had been they'd had a relationship for at least 6 years, you know. So yeah, how anybody in this day and age hasn't learned that lesson. If you get caught, just say, hey, I got caught.
Yep. You also recently tweeted that Aaron Rai is the perfect major champion for the times we're in, bringing civility to an increasingly crass sports scene. What'd you mean by that?
Well, I mean, you know, we saw crowd behavior at the Ryder Cup. We've seen crowd behavior at Rory getting the USA champs. Where was that? The Byron Nelson, but whatever, you know.
The PGA.
PGA, yeah, exactly. And you know, the crowd behavior out there is getting ruder, I would say. And here comes along Aaron Rai, who is just the nicest guy you could ever possibly meet. He's 31 years old. He's played on a zillion different minor tours all around the world. He's just sort of getting his feet on the ground. And you know, what I'll always remember is he made that 70-foot birdie putt, and just, you know, his reaction to it was just like, you know, a shy smile, almost like he was embarrassed that it went in. I think he's a good calming influence in an increasingly hectic time. And golf's in an awkward position, like every other entertainment entity out there. It's trying to reach a younger audience, and so in some ways, it's encouraging some of this behavior. And I'm not entirely sure that that's the right road to go down.
I couldn't agree with that statement more. And just to take that a step further, Ron, this whole heckling of Rory thing has become a thing. And now, can we get this toothpaste back in the tube? I mean, I was talking to Tom Patry about this last week on the show, and you know, the bottom line is, if you did that at Augusta National, you would be escorted off the property and never allowed back on again. I mean, something I think has to happen so that fans know that, you know what, we don't tolerate that in our game. You want to do that, go somewhere else.
They do need to take a harder stand on that and start throwing people out. You know, the thing that astounds me about the Rory McIlroy thing is this guy's lived in Florida forever now. He was the biggest, most vocal defender of the PGA Tour against Live Golf. You know, I mean, it's just like everything about him has been, he went to bat for the American Tour, the American Pro Tour out there. And to try to taunt him for being from Northern Ireland is just, it's bizarre. And, you know, clearly at the Ryder Cup, it went over the line with all the vulgarities that were there. But even the just taunting of him in the non-vulgar way, as was going on at the PGA, is something that I think that at least at the major championships, they're going to have to figure out how to crack down on.
Speaking of the Ryder Cup and all of that, the PGA of America's president, Don Ray, has been let go, and he came under extreme fire for the things that he said in and around the Ryder Cup about the fan behavior. And he was, like I say, abruptly replaced. Do you think the PGA, do they actually get it? Ron, do they get why this was so wrong and so badly handled? Because it's been so many months later that this has happened. Or did they just kind of succumb to the public outcry and said, all right, we'll get rid of him?
Well, the CEO sort of apologized to McIlroy pretty immediately. And it was Don who was pretty much out on an island alone there. I do think they got it after the fact. They certainly didn't get it at the time. They didn't crack down on it. You know, they had one of their first tee announcers leading some of the vulgar chants at Rory McIlroy. So they didn't get it at the time. Look, they were charging $750 for a one-day ticket to that event. And one of the reasons that they love Bethpage is its proximity to New York City and all the corporate hospitality dollars that it brings in. So it was a very lucrative event for them. And I think that they wanted very large crowds. They probably wanted very, very vocal crowds. And they sort of, you know, it's like one of those golf tournaments when you go in and you have the greens right on the edge, and then the weather turns on you and you lose control of the greens. And that's sort of what happened at Bethpage. But I do think the PGA of America was slow to react to the entire situation.
Ron, you're such a wonderful proponent of the LPGA Tour, probably more than anybody else. And we're seeing the LPGA Tour gaining in some areas. They're gaining in financial support. The purses they are playing for now are higher than ever. It's getting more airtime, albeit probably not the most optimal airtimes. But the TV ratings are just continuing to be in decline, even lower than it was 4 years ago, according to USTVDB.com. Larger purses, but declining ratings is not a really good recipe.
No, they need, they need somebody to hang their marketing sign on out there, and they need their Scotty Scheffler. Nelly Korda she's had a bizarre career. She won 4 times in 2021, including a major, and she won the gold medal in the Olympics. Then she won once in 22. Didn't win it all in 23, won 7 times in 24 with a major, didn't win it all last year, and now she's out there with 3 wins this year. So she's put together a lot of wins there, but it's like every other year. There hasn't been that consistent greatness the way Scotty Scheffler has now. What are we into about year 4 of him being on the leaderboard every time he tees the golf ball up? The LPGA needs that. They could use a really good rivalry. They could use a Jack to Nelly's Arnold out there. Gina Tittacool gives a hint at that. They were hoping Rose Zhang would be that. Now that Rose Zhang's she's been a pro for 3 years, but she's just going to graduate from Stanford next month. So maybe that she'll get out there full time and she'll be that. We thought maybe Lydia Ko, but they need names they can market, and they need a rivalry they can market.
Is that the advice? If you had an opportunity to sit down with Craig Kessler, the LPGA Tour commissioner, is that the advice you would give him? Like, hey, you guys need to start promoting something along the lines to kind of get the juices going, if you will, to kind of spice up the tour a little bit. It needs something. And is that what you're saying? What they need is someone to rise up to be Nelly's Arnold Palmer to her Jack Nicklaus?
Yeah, and I'm not sure that's something the commissioner can control.
Right.
They need somebody. They need somebody to go out there and be the dominant player, be the Caitlin Clark. Be the person that people want to tune in to watch. And speaking of Caitlin Clark, that is a good news, bad news situation for the LPGA. The good news is women's sports is on a front burner right now, and corporations are starting to realize that they can market women athletes and women's sporting events and make money off of it. It astounded me that it's taken them this long to do it. Caitlin Clark was certainly probably the single most important thing that did it. So that's the good news for the LPGA. Women's sports is on a front burner. The bad news is there's a lot more competition for those corporate dollars right now. There is a WNBA. There's the women's national soccer team. There are pro soccer leagues out there. There's lacrosse. There's a bunch of other different sports out there competing for that money. And so the LPGA's got to figure out how to get a bigger piece of that pie. I think the single most important thing that would help the LPGA is more TV exposure on the networks on the weekends. As great of a job as Golf Channel does covering golf, when you're on the Golf Channel, you're preaching to the choir. Those are already golf fans. You need to be on network TV, so you're reaching the casual golf fan, the casual sports fan. The way when Tiger Woods was at his peak, he did more to grow the game as a spectator sport than he did as a participatory sport. Golf was in a participatory recession until COVID. And now the last 5-6 years, it's been hot out there. But Tiger grew the game as a spectator sport, and that's what the LPGA needs. Get on network TV more and try to grow the game that way.
Ron, you mentioned basketball, and college basketball is doing something that's got me scratching my head, because now March Madness is going to 72 teams. It's going to be ridiculous at some point. They're going to have a regular season to decide which 5 teams don't make it to the tournament. Yeah. What are your thoughts about seeing March Madness grow to this extent?
I'll tell you, I'm not a fan of what college football has done to college basketball. Let's put it that way. And I think this is all football driven. Look how the conferences have changed. The ACC tournament used to really mean something, and it was one of the great basketball events of the year. And I think that now the conferences are so big that dilutes rivalries. I want to see North Carolina and Duke play. I don't want to see North Carolina play Syracuse or Pittsburgh.
Easy on our Pitt Panthers.
Yeah, but it's. I think that by expanding the well, look, they're talking about taking the football playoff to 24 teams, 72 teams for basketball. What's the regular season for?
Right.
And I think it's very short-sighted on their fact. I think that they're jumping in. There's probably a lot of media money that's being thrown their way to do this, but in the long run, it's going to dilute rivalries, and I think it's going to weaken fan bases.
Ron, just a couple more before I let you go, and we got to get local to some Pittsburgh stuff. We've talked a little Pirates history in the past, and the team is more competitive this season than they've been. At least they're over 500 and not already eliminated from playoff contention like they've largely been in late May in the past. Do you think they're going to make some moves this summer to try to capitalize on the last few seasons they'll probably have in the Paul Skeens era?
I think they, if they continue to play the way they are right now, I think they will. They're in a division that it's so weird. The NL Central is emerging as one of the strongest divisions in baseball right now. Everybody's over 500 in that division, but it's a division they could win. They could certainly be a wild card team. And I think the fact that they spent some money in the off season, and then they did sign Connor Griffith to a 9-year contract.
Right.
I think that that's a very positive sign that if they're in the hunt come the trade deadline, they'll spend some money and make some moves.
How do you feel about the Steelers bringing back Aaron Rodgers for one more season?
I wasn't a fan when they signed him originally. I heard such good things out of training camp about Will Howard, and who knows the guy? Aaron says it's going to be his last season, so maybe he's got one more miracle in him. But this team has been baffling to me. And look, let's face it. If you look at the last 2 or 3 years of Roethlisberger's career, he wasn't who he once was. So it's been a long time since they've had a quarterback.
Yeah.
And it's been it's a real testament to Mike Tomlin that they kept finishing 10-7 every year and then getting crushed in the first round of the playoffs. But I'll be hopeful. I'm always hopeful.
And I'm a big Will Howard fan. I hope he gets an opportunity to show what he can do.
It was too bad that he got hurt
Yes.
early in the year last year, because everything out of training camp was how impressive he was.
Ron, before I let you go, remind our listeners how they can go out and get copies of your books, plus also follow you online and over social media.
Yeah, you could, if you just put my name, you go to Amazon, or you could go to the vision54.com site, and their book page will also direct you to Amazon, and you'll find the books there. You can follow me on Twitter, which I continue to call it, at Ron Sirak. And my website is ronsirak.com.
Ron, it's always such a privilege to get to spend some time with you. I always enjoy it immensely. The time flies by. I hope I get this privilege with you again soon.
Thanks for having me on. Always a pleasure, Chris.
Take care, Ron. All the best to you and your family.
You too.
See ya. That is the great Ron Sirak, folks. They don't come better than that guy. One of the all-timers. Again, you don't end up in Hall of Fames and in the positions that he's been over the course of his career without being the top of the top. Again, received the PGA of America Lifetime Achievement Award in Journalism and the Media Excellence Award from the LPGA. Go out there and follow him on X, Twitter, whatever you want to call it, at Ron Sirak, Sirak, vision54.com or Amazon to pick up his books. He is just one of the great people that you get to meet in this game. I'm so excited to catch up with him. I hope I get that opportunity a little bit later on this summer. and we'll be right back. Golf season is back, and Sunday Swagger just made sure you're going to be ready. Their new spring collection just dropped. They've got 60 bold, performance-driven styles for men, women, and youth. And if all that isn't enough, well, they just linked up with Pennzoil and Team Penske for a race-inspired collection that brings serious trackside energy to the fairways. With styles for men, women, and youth, you're guaranteed to turn heads and spark conversation when you wear Sunday Swagger. Visit SundaySwagger.com, join the Sunday Club for exclusive drops and member benefits, and folks, Sunday Swagger is going to give you what? Polos with personality. Again, check them out online, SundaySwagger.com. And folks, Squares Golf, best golf shoes on the planet by far. It's not a gimmick, it's not marketing, it's science. Don't take my word for it. Let's hear from six-time major champion Sir Nick Faldo.
You've heard of Squares, and there's a reason why. Because the best swings in golf don't start with your hands. They start from the ground up. Most golf shoes are built for looks, not performance. Squares breaks the mold. Our patented design gives your toes room to engage the ground, creating more stability, balance, and solid contact. Your same swing, now powered from the ground up. Experience the Squares advantage at squares.com. Squares. Performance starts where you stand.
All right, now back to more of the show. All right, now back with me is a guy who has been a very important part of this show since he first joined me all the way back in May of 2014, and that is 2003 PGA champion Shaun Micheel. Shaun is by far the most underrated player in the history of the PGA Tour, in my opinion. He doesn't get nearly enough credit for what he's achieved over the course of his playing career. Not only did he win that 2003 PGA Championship, he very nearly backed it up a couple of years later in 2006 when he finished second to Tiger at Medina, which people tend to forget. He would go on to defeat Tiger that year at the World Match Play Championship in the first round, did it 4-3, finished runner-up that week to Paul Casey in the final. Shaun so far has 20 top 10 finishes, 57 top 25s. He is one of only 3 players to ever record a double eagle in the U.S. Open, which he did back in 2010 at Pebble Beach. And I'm very humbled to say this. This is his 40th appearance with me here on the show. So yes, he's one of my all-time favorite guests and people on the planet for that matter. And I couldn't be more excited to get to spend some more time with him this week here on Next on the Tee. Hey, Shaun, how are you, my friend?
Hi, Chris. Good evening. How are you?
I'm fantastic. How are you?
I'm doing great. Just sitting here watching a little Oklahoma City and Spurs and watching a little sunset. All's good in the Micheel household.
Good for you. Shaun, you are fresh off of playing in the PGA Championship. Before we talk about what it was like playing the course, take us inside the Champions Dinner. We'd all love to be a fly on the wall for that event. What did Scotty arrange for you guys for the evening?
No, it's so fun. You know, it's really changed. The dynamic of the dinner has changed. It's really, I would say it started when I was hosting, because up until 2004, the champion had a dinner. He hosted a dinner, and then the spouse or significant other hosted a dinner. So my year was the first time that Stephanie and I that we hosted the dinner together. And so up until about 5 or 6 years ago, you know, the room was 150 people, filled with, of course, all the champions that were there. Many of the officers. There was a lot of people that were part of the whole night, and consequently, the night was fantastic. But it took quite a bit of time, you know. And I think there were some conversations had that really wanted to take the dinner back to just the champions, you know, kind of a la the Masters. But let me tell you, when you're in that room and you're around some of those, you know, deserving champions, I mean, they're all, you know, so young now. There's just a lot of stories being told, and just a lot of great camaraderie, really. You know, this year, I have to see the pictures, 15 or 16 champions there. Rory was supposed to be there, and I think Rory had a big time issue with one of his toes. His parking spot was right next to mine at Aronimink. And he mentioned to me, he said, "Hey, I'll see you at the dinner," you know, and, but it's a fantastic night. This year, Scotty did such a great job as the host. It was an incredible menu. We started off with meatballs, and then we had chicken parmesan, steak, and mashed potatoes, onion rings, gelato. I mean, it was a fantastic night, and it's just really fun and really fun to be a part of.
You mentioned that the stories are great. Who's the best storyteller sitting around that table?
Well, it's funny, like Dave Stockton, Senior, he talks quite a bit. Mark Brooks, who really kind of assumed the host role in 2022. Phil had won at Kiowa in 2021, and then all the kind of the live stuff began. And Phil didn't play that year's PGA, so he didn't even he wasn't at the dinner in 22. So Mark Brooks has really taken on a role of sharing a lot of stories. And this year, Mark got up and spoke, and he really talked about Scotty and his accomplishments as a junior player, his accomplishments in college, and his significant kind of impact that he's having on his community and the young players that are trying to learn to play golf. I mean, it's fantastic what he and his wife are doing, in the community of Dallas. But every year it's something a little bit different. This year, I think guys were a little bit more shy about saying a few things. Mark, kind of being the host, kind of went around and asked players kind of what their biggest mulligan was, and there were a few. I think the funniest of the night was Keegan Bradley raised his hand and he kind of said, he goes, "Well, my mulligan would be not having 2-inch rough at Bethpage." That was kind of the coup de grace really of the night. Nobody really knew what to say. Everybody chuckled. And it's good to see he's got a sense of humor now that we've had a few months. Well, not more than a few months have passed since those 3 days there at Bethpage. But I told a story one year. Mark kind of went up and he said, "Hey, I want everybody to talk about the best shot that they've hit and maybe the worst shot that they've hit." And everybody recalled something that had an impact on maybe a tournament, not even as a pro, just maybe some of the great things that led them down the path of being a professional golfer, or and so he gets to me and he's like, "Okay, McKeel, we already know your best shot. What's your worst shot?" And so I said, and I've said this on your show before, but I said, this particular story led to a serious injury and a grown man crying on the golf course. Well, that generated a lot of kind of everybody kind of got quiet. They wanted to hear my story, and quickly I had a young man that was really good friends with my caddy, Tony Lingard. He's caddied for me for a long, long time. And he has cerebral palsy. So if anybody knows about DJ Gregory and the walks that he takes every single week on the PGA Tour, they know what this debilitating disease is all about. And I was on the 14th hole at the Byron Nelson in about 2011, I think. And I tried to hit a punch hook around this tree, and it came out straight and it went into the crowd. Of course, you're yelling "for" and everything. And I walked up there and there was a crowd for him. There was someone on the ground, and it happened to be, his name is Adolfo Aguiar. He's from Texas. And he has cerebral palsy, and I had hit him right in the forehead. Ooh. And it was one of the worst times that I'd ever felt. I think players are always anxious, about balls going into the crowd and stuff like that. And sometimes you just don't know what to say. Sometimes you're so embarrassed, you just walk away. But in this particular instance, Adolfo was bleeding pretty heavily, and I had obviously a couple of towels on my golf bag, and I felt so bad. I literally had tears kind of in my eyes, and it was, but after that story, Padraig Harrington stood up and he says, "I nominate Adolfo as being an honorary member of the PGA of America." So, anyway, it was quite a night, but that was kind of my story. But so many of these guys, they've been around for so long, they've had so much success in golf, way more wins than I've had. And so there's a lot more for them to recount than I have. I mean, I probably have more bad things to say than good things, but that's okay. It's just the way it is. But they're fun nights. That's all I can say.
Sean, when I think back on your career, and we've talked about this several times, I mean, I look at all of the things that you achieved, and I said this in your intro, and I say it every time you come on the show. I think by far you're one of the most underrated players ever on the PGA Tour. I mean, for crying out loud, you're a whisker away from being a two-time major champion, 20 top 10s, 57 top 25s. I mean, you're part of the 1% of the 1%. And I think the media has unfortunately beaten your record down over the years and been very unfair to you. When you look back on you, are you happy with the things? I mean, do you recognize that, 99.9% of the golfers out there haven't achieved nearly what you have done? Do you give yourself the credit and kind of block out the noise from the idiots in the media trying to knock your record?
Well, I mean, I believe we've talked about this a lot. And I mean, ultimately it comes down to me. I mean, the results are really what they are. I mean, I look back in the way I played and how I played. I know you talked a little bit about sports psychology with Ron. I kind of got on right at that as that was going on. And I had mentioned that in an interview I did a couple of years ago. I was like, I really wish I would have kind of given some effort to seeing a Dr. Rotella or somebody to kind of help me navigate some of the things, particularly after the PGA. But in terms of my golf, I seem to putt a lot better now. I think I have a lot more freedom in the way that I approach the game. I'm not afraid to try certain shots. I work really hard on my short game, and I definitely got caught up in the swing part. And, I told Rich Lerner of the Golf Channel a couple of years ago, I said, when I won the PGA, I kind of abandoned the things that I was doing up to that point. And I mean by I was playing more golf. I was playing a lot of golf with my friends here at home. Always had practice round games. I was playing a lot with my dad's group, who I'd played with since I was a young child. And I basically went back to TPC Southwind and with an alignment rod and a video camera. And it was really self-destructive. Now, some of the things that I've heard, I think they hurt, because I've never been braggadocious about really anything that I've ever done in my life. I mean, most people that know me they know that I don't like to be the center of attention. Now, I will get up and I'll do karaoke. I do enjoy that, but I just never understood, I think, the criticisms that I took. I don't understand, even to this day, I don't understand the rankings. I don't understand the comparisons between players, between Jack and Tiger. I mean, okay, you're just going to go by numbers, but many of our age group would probably say, well, Tiger's the best because we didn't see Jack play in his heyday. So I don't really like the comparisons that a lot of the sports people do, not even just in golf, but in basketball, whether it's Michael Jordan versus Larry Bird, or, it's just really unfair, and it's just things that you can't do. So some of those things did hurt me. It hurt me personally, I think, because some of the things that were written, many of the writers, they didn't even ask to interview me. They never asked to get a one-on-one to understand maybe where I was coming from. And not even that I would disagree with some of the things that they had to say, but maybe to give them a little understanding about me personally and what I was kind of going through. And they made some of it with Aaron Rai, with Alex Smalley, it would have been his first win, could have been a PGA Championship. And so I get mentioned, a lot with that. And it's a huge responsibility, comes with winning a major championship. And with that being your first win, I was kind of like, well, I just didn't really know what to do after that. I didn't know kind of how to practice, or I didn't know how to kind of wrap my head around, what I was going to be feeling by, coming from relatively an anonymous type career. I mean, I've been on tour 4 or 5 years, but nobody really knew a whole lot about me. But yeah, we could talk all day about it. But some of the things did hurt me, yes. And I guess it more really just kind of angered me more than anything else. But, look, I was playing great golf, 2007. I felt a weird kind of twinge in my shoulder, and, I thought, oh, well, what's that? I'd never really been injured. I've never had a back problem, knock on wood. And I battled through that, and then ultimately I just couldn't play. And I found that I had a torn labrum and a partially torn bicep tendon. And Dr. Andrews out of Birmingham, I was out almost 11 months and probably came back too soon. So that came at the end of my exemption. I was grinding to kind of keep my card. I played great in 2010, basically out of the 126 to 150 category. My mom was diagnosed with lung cancer in 2009. She passed away, in October of 2010. And I was kind of lost soul. I just lost a lot. It happens every day. People lose people every single day, and it's difficult. And I, instead of maybe playing for her and channeling some of the positivity that she gave me as a child and growing up, I just was like, woe is me type of thing. Like I was the only one that ever had lost somebody that they really loved. And it really hurt my game in 2011 because that was the last year that I was fully exempt. So anyway, I'm over a lot of the stuff. I try to just, the results are what they are. I look back at some of the things that I did practicing. I was always I'm a nervous type person in front of a lot of people, and I always took kind of the conservative route. I was a very conservative player, and I think ultimately that's why I didn't win more.
Sean, let's switch gears a little bit. I want to get on the golf course with you because, again, you're here just on the heels of the PGA, and I want to get your thoughts on Aronimik. Had you ever played the golf course before, and what were your thoughts about this year's PGA?
I did play. I think it was 2010 and 2011. But to be honest with you, it really wasn't that memorable. I don't know why. I don't know if it's just because I'm at that age or it was that long ago. I'm not really sure. But I can tell you this, that if they ever set up a rotation of golf courses for the PGA Championship, that's one they should pick. I absolutely loved that golf course. Those are the types of golf courses that I really, really kind of fell in love with. I think really kind of suited my game. They were so difficult, and they were really difficult in every aspect. Like, Aronimik gave you plenty of room off the tee. Yeah, there was some movement. Some of the fairways were kind of sloped, and so you kind of had to pay attention off the tee. But it wasn't like you could just, if you got it in the fairway, it's like, oh, I'll just hit it on the green and make putts. I put out a social media post during maybe the third round or the fourth round, and I talked about the players on tour because I was a tour member for a long time. But most of the tour players, they basically just fire at the flags because you can putt from 360 degrees around the hole. At Aronimik, you couldn't do that. It didn't mean that you couldn't make a 20-footer up over a ridge, but it just meant that you were more defensive. And there was a lot of complaining I heard from players that were upset with some of the pin positions. And there were a couple that weren't, that kind of drew the ire of probably every player out there. But, just because you're in the fairway, if you weren't on the right part of the fairway, you just didn't have a great angle. I think, 11's a perfect example. It's a short hole, but they put that pin on the front right over there, and it was downwind. You just couldn't shoot at it. So I loved every aspect of the course. It was in fantastic shape. Probably one of the best courses I've played probably in my career. Just the fairways were lush. They were thick. The ball set up. The greens were incredibly smooth. Now they were really, really fast. I mean, really fast, even when they were wet the first 2 days. Bunkering was strategically placed. There were a lot of bunkers. I mean, I know it's like 160, 170 bunkers there. They came into play for all players. It wasn't like I could hit driver on every hole, like on 3, for example, or even 2. There were bunkers that would affect guys that hit at 290, and there were bunkers that affected guys that hit 320. It just was a really good kind of redo, I think. A lot of the trees were gone. It seems to be the thing that's kind of rocking course design, I think, right now is let's just get rid of all the trees. I understand the turf management aspect of it, but I always liked horses like Oak Hill, Medina, where I finished second. Baltusrol, some of these old style courses that kind of kept kept the trees around. But it truly was a fantastic course, and they got a great champion. I mean, Aaron, what he did the last 9 holes, really the last 10 holes, is truly remarkable. And what a heck of a run he went on, to win that tournament.
There were a couple of really long holes out there. 15 and 18 were over 500-yard par 4s. 15 was 542 yards. If that's not an advertisement for why the golf ball needs to be rolled back, I don't know what is. How did you contend with par 4s that were playing that long?
Well, to be honest with you, I really wasn't driving it that well, which was unfortunate. I played a practice round, and I had a local caddy until my son got up there. I missed one fairway on the practice run on Sunday, and I was like, this golf course is playable. It was pretty firm. I'm hitting, I think in the practice round, I think I hit a 3 hybrid into there. I hit a great drive off the tee in the practice round and had a 3 hybrid. So it wasn't overly, it was downwind, but, I've been plagued by an internally rotated right arm on my backswing. And if people saw it, they'd probably throw up, so I just, under the pressure, Sunday was one thing to go out and play and didn't have anybody out there. But, when the pressure gets on, players, they revert back to bad habits. And that's kind of what I got into. But now it didn't help that I'm playing with 2 kids whose combined age didn't add up to mine. That was tough. And, Michael Brennan were 2 fantastic guys, by the way, Garrick and Michael. They were great to me. They gave me plenty of high fives, very supportive, asked me a lot of questions about, kind of my life on tour. And so there was some conversation out there and everything. But Michael hits it so far. I think he's number 2 in driving distance, if I'm not mistaken. And Garrick has to be right up there too. But Garrick got off to a really inauspicious start by being late to the tee the first day. So he got docked a 2-shot penalty, which I can't say that I've ever been part of that. I've heard of that happening, but I'm not sure I've never been in a group where someone was late to the tee box. So
that ultimately cost him, right? Because if he doesn't get that, he makes the
cut.
cut.
Yeah, it's funny. Like you say that, and my wife, we've had this discussion, numerous times, and I've explained to her that not really. I mean, okay, you can look back and say, but when he got the 2-shot penalty on the tee box, I told him after the round, it was really the next day. And I said, you really should hold your head up high. I said, I know you're disappointed with the 2-shot penalty and whatever happened to you out there. I said, but for that to happen on the first hole of a major championship with as difficult as this golf course, you should hold your head up high about how well you handled that. And, I don't know how he took that, but he made some mistakes on Friday. He hit it over the green on 2 with a wedge, sand wedge, made bogey. There were several holes that he made mistakes on that I think he would say really cost him. And yeah, I mean, because he shot 76 on Friday, and he really wasn't out of position too often. So maybe just the pressure, of making sure he didn't miss the cut because of what happened to him on Thursday. Maybe that had an effect on him. But look, the golf course was tough, and but you sure didn't need to be giving up 2 shots to it by being late to a tee. That's for sure.
Sean, we've talked a little bit about this in the past, but even though you're a major champion and almost a 2-time major champion, unfortunately, that doesn't exempt you to go out and play on the Champions Tour, something I don't understand. So you're not able to get the tournament reps to stay sharp. Talk about why reps during a tournament is very different from going out and playing with your buddies, whether it's at TPC, Southwind, or other courses around Memphis.
I mean, I can't, I can't replicate what happens at a tour event by hitting balls and playing golf course at TPC Southwind or my home course at Ridgeway Country Club. Because when you're out there, I got my music playing. There's no accountability. I mean, I have my own personal accountability for, the preparation and what I'm doing in my practice. But when I got to make a 5 or 6 footer in competition, if I miss it, it costs me something. On the practice green, I just hit another one. It's tough to compete, especially on the Champions Tour. I turned 50 on January 5th of 2019, and I guarantee you that I've played less than 50 tournaments since then. I recently got kicked off the European Senior Tour. That was in December. They voted me out of my category, and so I don't get to play there. So now I'm really scrambling to try to find places to play. And, people ask me why I played the PGA Championship. There are several reasons. One is there are certain things that I have to do to keep my membership active. Okay. And that affects health insurance, other things like that. I have to play a certain number of tournaments or those things go away. The other is, and really more importantly, I think, are just competition, playing, trying to keep myself ready for the next opportunity on the Champions Tour. Now, am I going to win the PGA? No. But does that mean that I shouldn't play? I mean, some people would argue, well, if you can't win, why are you playing? Well, I play because I need the reps. I love being out there. I love the fans. I love being around the young players. I love getting free clubs in the trailers Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. I love being around that kind of golf. I think major championship golf. I mean, it's just different. And so, but I leave Sunday for Palm Beach. I'm going to play the Bears Club for the U.S. Senior Open qualifying next Wednesday. So on the 3rd, I'm going to go try to qualify for an event, the Champions event in Iowa. I wrote for several of exemptions. I got an exemption at Hogue this year, which is just named today to be the new host of the Senior Players Championship going forward. So I got an exemption there, and got to play with a good buddy of mine, Fred Couples. We played on Sunday and really enjoyed that. But I need to play some tournaments, and the only way I'm going to do that is to either get an exemption or qualify. And I don't get many exemptions, so I'll be entering the Monday qualifying circuit here in a couple of weeks and be doing that. Now that I'm no longer allowed to play in Europe, I'm just going to focus everything on the United States and just trying to play some tournament golf. But it is frustrating, there's only 78 players, and the players that are like me, they all probably have reason enough to argue that they should be able to play a few events. But it's just not the way that it works out there. And the longer that this goes, when I don't get to play tournaments, I can't show up. It's hard to show up and just think you're going to win in the first week that you come back. But, that's really my only option.
So why is that your only option? What happened with the European Legends Tour? I thought that would be a great place for you.
Well, and that's funny because I told my wife, I said, Stephanie, late fall, I said, I didn't play enough events on the Champions Tour to satisfy this membership thing. It's really a long story. I mean, I'm still a member of the tour and everything. There's just things that benefits that I get if I play a certain number of events. They call it being health subsidy eligible. Okay. But, I got an email in about 10 days before Christmas, and it was from the chief operating officer of the Legends Tour. And it started out with, "Hey, Sean, I hope you're having a festive holiday season. I'm just writing to basically let you know that the tournament committee, there's a 7-person tournament committee that made a decision that if you didn't play 150 career events on the DP World Tour, you were no longer allowed to be part of your category." Now, I, along with Rich Beam, were part of 14 players that were in the former major winners category. So you think of like Michael Campbell and Ernie Els and Colin Montgomery and all these guys, Ola Fable, these guys, that played in Europe primarily in their careers. I was kicked out of that category, and so is Rich Beam. Now, Rich doesn't play as much, so maybe he didn't really care too much. I don't know, but I followed that up with the vice president, and I asked him. I said, this just doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Why you would vote me out? I said, what did I do? And basically, the response I got was, it was basically retaliation for Q School being taken off the schedule for Champions Tour. And then he said something like, well, the United States is not letting our best players compete, which is BS. But what they did do, and I say they is because I don't have a vote, I'm not a voting member on the Champions Tour, is they added a category regulation that says that if you're a non-member of the tour, basically meaning you've never played the PGA Tour, you never played the Korn Ferry or Champions Tour really, you have to play 7 events to be counted on the money list. And I think that goes back to there were a lot of players have gotten through tour school that never played the PGA Tour. There were some Australian players that I think for reference. Now, that's just the way the rules are. I mean, but they decided to change them. And so, consequently, the European Tour kind of felt like, well, you're not letting our best players play. We're not going to let your guys play on our tour. And that affected me and Rich Beam. So it's really disheartening, I think, because at one time I had a caddy. I've played in 36 or 37 countries. I've played in 66 European Tour events. So yes, not 150, but one caddy he nicknamed me the American with the passport. That's what he used to call me. And because I can't tell you how many people came up to me when I was playing in Europe. We're so happy that you came over. And traveling the world is always something that I've done. I've always enjoyed traveling and competing. And so to have received that email, that hurt too. Not only hurt me personally because I just don't understand this nationalistic approach to golf that we've now found ourselves in. And where it's like, well, we're just going to keep our group. The PGA Tour are bent over backwards for the European Tour. They own 25 to 30% of the European Tour. If they didn't have the PGA Tour money, where would they be? Maybe they'd be owned by Liv or PIF. I have no idea. But I'm still not real happy about it. I definitely had a few less conversations with some of the European players that are on that committee at the senior PGA. I'm upset by it. And I just don't look at them as the same way that I did before. And they're not going to change their rules. They're not going to let me back on. And so they told me that I could maybe get some exemptions, but I don't know if I want to do that. So plus, I don't know, they don't want me there as a regular member out of a category, which, I won the Singapore Open, which they count as a European Tour win. So I just frustrated by the whole particular situation. And I explained to people, like, you don't ever want to burn your bridges, but it really upset me. And it angered me for quite a while. I still not quite over it yet because I just don't get it. I really just don't get it. Commissioner Fincham started this commissioner's exemption where in about the early 2000s, where the PGA Tour had 2 exemptions for foreign players. The majority of those foreign players were Europeans. There were some Japanese players. Ryo Ishikawa comes to mind. There were a few others, but the majority of those exemptions went to European Tour players. So we have been over backwards to make sure they can come over and play our tour, but they don't reciprocate over there. And so it's just the way it is. And, so I'm not a member of that tour, and I probably won't ever be again. But funny enough, about 3 days after I got the letter, I got an email from the DP World Tour and said, "Hey, Sean, it's time for you to renew your membership." Now, I'm a member of the European Tour, the DP World Tour, as a past champion member of distinction. So I actually have a category at the very bottom, but I can commit to tournaments if I want. I can still get exemptions if I want, if they'd have me. But they literally 3 days after that sent me the time for me to renew my membership. And I thought about it. I did ultimately pay the membership fee, and I am still a member of the European Tour, the regular European Tour, but I don't know for how much longer.
One of the things I think about is, the DP World Tour. I wonder if there's some residual there, right? Because the top 10 players of the DP World Tour, right? They earn their PGA Tour card. And now there's been a lot of
Yeah.
flack about how those players are coming over here. Their best players are coming over here, kind of depleting the talent of the DP World Tour. And people are upset about that. So you just kind of wonder,
Yeah.
like, how does all this fit together?
Well, I can promise you this, and I've heard this numerous times. People have written about the European Tour being a feeder tour to the PGA Tour, and whatever they say, it 100% is. There is no debate because the money is nowhere near, obviously, what the PGA Tour plays for. Now, is the money going to get pulled back a little bit now that the PIF is going to, stop, funding Live? I mean, maybe, I don't know if the tour, if the signature events are going to grow or if they're going to shrink a little bit in prize money. I have no idea. But yeah, their top 10 players just come right onto the PGA Tour. That's 10 less spots for the American players. I'm like, screw it. If we're going to be nationalistic, I think it's time for us to take care of our own, and, that's the approach that they took with me and to Rich Beam. And it's maybe the approach we should take with them. If that's the game they want to play, then maybe that's what we should be doing. I know that's not a great positive message on my part. I think maybe I'm just kind of speaking before thinking, a little bit. And so because listen, I do understand, why, their tour, as they say, as the Europeans say, our senior tour started to provide opportunities for players, that played the European Tour. And I understand that. But if you go down the list of players, and I've done this, I've played 66 European events. I've played more events in my career than some of the players that are fully exempt on the European Senior Tour. And so I'm like, this doesn't make any. It's like Groundhog Day. It just doesn't make any sense. And so yes, I took it personally. Now, has anybody interviewed Mark or Ryan Howsam, who basically owns the tour? Has anybody interviewed? No, because nobody cares. It's the European Senior Tour. It's the Legends Tour. They don't want me over there. They just don't want guys like me over there. And I think Bo Van Pelt won the event last year at Trump Aberdeen. I was there, and I don't think they want him there. And that's just how it is. That's just how I think a lot of the mindset of some of the players are over there. And it clearly they created this rule and voted me off. So good riddance, I guess.
Well, that's completely unfortunate because you would think on a tour that doesn't get a whole lot of worldwide recognition that you would want in your field. Again, I get the idea of you want your own and you want your European Tour legends, the Ian Woosnams and Jose Maria Olazabal and all those guys out there playing. But you would think you would want to have a field that you could market to say, we've got this many majors out here in this field, including you and Rich Beam amongst the major winners. You would think that would be a great marketing tool. Again, this isn't, and I love Clark Dennis is a wonderful friend of this show, and he's played out on the Legends Tour a lot.
Yep.
And I respect that, and I'm rooting Clark on every single week when he's out there. But you would think that that's a tour that just doesn't get a whole lot of TV time, a whole lot of recognition, and what's a better way to get more recognition by being able to say our field is loaded with former major champions, and here's a big old list of them. And you would think they would want you and Rich amongst that list. That's disappointing to hear how they're taking this stance on this.
Yeah, well, listen, I got a call. I called Clark right after I got the email because he's on the committee that voted. And
is that right?
He said that vote, yes, that vote came down in November. They had 2 back-to-back events in Cambodia in November, right over Thanksgiving. I was going to go, but it was right over Thanksgiving, and then I was doing something with my daughter at LSU, and I just couldn't go. But that vote took place at a meeting in Cambodia. I didn't find out about it till I believe about the 19th of December. And I called Clark, and we had numerous conversations, about this particular issue that I have with who wants who to play, which countries are going to be represented, which countries do they not want, and I'm not going to get into all of it, but I'm assuming through my conversation with Clark that he did not vote to excommunicate me, I suppose. I would assume he wouldn't do that. But here's the other thing. It's what I asked him in an email, and I never got a response. I said, well, if you were going to do this rule, why didn't you just say, Sean, we're going to change this rule in 27, and you can play in 26 if you don't play enough tournaments and you don't keep your card, well, you're going to be out of your category. But instead of doing that, they just sent me an email and said, you're off. And that's what really, really upset me. You know, you talk about the Pete Rose and the cover-ups and all this stuff is kind of worse than the crime. It's like, why would you not let a player know that with these rules that you're going to change? Because here's the thing. So many people have asked me about the particular situation. They asked me, did this have anything to do with the amount that you were playing? And I said, apparently not, because I asked them that. Now, the difficulties for me playing the Legends Tour regularly and trying to qualify for Champions events. The Legends Tour, they may have changed this rule to more, but I had to commit 30 days prior to the event. Well, the Champions Tour and the PGA Tour, I only have to commit the Friday before. Okay, so the 30-day window was difficult for me because if I'm Monday qualifying or if I write for a sponsor's exemption, I'm typically the type of player that I'm kind of the last guy to get the exemption. It's like, oh, well, we don't have anybody else to give it to, so I guess we'll give it to Sean. Well, that comes at the last minute. So if I've committed to playing the Legends Tour event, and I get an exemption to play in the States, and I withdraw from Europe, I can do that once or twice without getting too much of a problem. But then it becomes finable, and I could be suspended if that continues. So being a player that doesn't want to commit to an event, if I might withdraw, I just don't enter the event. Now, fast forward to last fall, when I didn't play enough on the Champions Tour, I told Stephanie I'm going to play more in Europe. Well, ironically, a month later, after that conversation, I get this letter. And so there are things like that that really prevented me from playing a full schedule. The other thing is their schedule's not great. Ask any of the players. They'll say the same thing. It's a topic of conversation at every single tournament that I played in every single meeting. They don't have a lot of sponsors lining up, to support that tour, and so, it's just gotten to the point where, they just want to kind of protect their own. And I understand that because the Champions Tour started by giving, senior tour age golfers an opportunity to play when there was no big, huge retirement. So I do see part of it. But the scheduling also is a difficult proposition. For example, they have a tournament in Greece. Well, I think that would be an awesome place to go play golf, except there's no tournament before and there's no tournament after. So I really don't want to fly to Greece for one tournament, spend $8,000 or $10,000 to fly and to play for a purse that if I won, I might make only $40,000. Or if I finish 15th, I make 8 or 7 and I lose money. So listen, there is a return on the investment. If you don't play, you can't win. And if you don't play, you're not going to get better. But I did all of this stuff when I was a young player playing in Asia, playing in South Africa, playing any mini tour I could play on. Now I just look at things like, do I need to go fly and spend $10,000 on a tournament that I may or may lose money on? I'm like, no. So that is totally 100% on me. And I accept that. But those are just some of the difficulties some of the decisions that I felt like I had to make for myself as to whether or not I was going to play a full-time schedule. Now, you give me a schedule where they're going to play 2 or 3 weeks in a row. Yeah. I mean, I could probably swing that, but it's difficult when you're trying to play both tours. It just doesn't work. It doesn't work. It hardly works at the PGA Tour level, and it definitely doesn't work at the senior level.
Sean, before I let you go, now you mentioned just a little while ago about some things that you're preparing to play in, qualifying for the U.S. Senior Open and that sort of thing. Where can we see you next?
So I'm going to be next week, June 3rd. I'll be playing at the Bears Club in Jupiter for the U.S. Senior Open. I'm going to try to qualify for the Champions event in Iowa in Des Moines. And then I'll be doing some more qualifiers. I'll be playing the Senior Open Championship at Glen Eagles. I might stay over for a week or two and play at the Stacia PGA Seniors, which is a huge event on their schedule. Even though I'm not a member of that tour, I'm still fully exempt on that for that event because they give me all PGA champions up until the age of 65. Unless, of course, they change the rule. If they listen to this show, they may not let me play. So I might do that. But again, I it's going to be Monday qualifying. I write for a few exemptions. I haven't written for too many lately. Maybe I get one at Firestone for the Senior Players Championship. But I just don't know. I'm 57 years of age now. It's funny. Like I've actually threatened to put an open to work on my LinkedIn page. I do. I practice every single day. I mean, I'm out there 4 or 5 hours every single day because I have to be ready for the next opportunity. And this is not a woe is me type of conversation I'm having. It's just the reality. This is where I am. And this affects every single athlete. Athletes don't oftentimes get the choice to retire. It wasn't like my dad at FedEx that when he turned 60, he had to retire. It's just bad play, injuries, better players. It's just not enough room for all players. And, consider me kind of a has-been type golfer. What I have is just to practice and try to be ready. And that's what I do. I mean, this conversation may not, I do have a good attitude. There are things that, yes, have frustrated me in my career. And I suppose this Legends thing is just one of them. But the reality of it is that I'm going to have to just get out there and compete, and I got to play well. If I want to play golf for a living, I've got to make myself available and be mentally ready to play and compete. And it's been done before. I mean, players like I look at Doug Barron, who's won 4 or 5 times on the Champions Tour. I mean, he went out and qualified, and I think he won his first event at Dick's. That's what you have to do, and that's just what I have to do, or I'm gonna have to like I said, go to LinkedIn and put open to work out there.
Sean, for all of us that are now even more so rooting for you than we were before, how can we stay up to date with you? How can we follow you on social media and see the great things that you're out there achieving?
I post a few things. I'm still out there on I'll call it Twitter and X and all that, and I'm still out there. And I have an Instagram page and stuff like that. But it's pretty easy to find me if you want to.
Sean, I can't thank you enough for being generous with your time and coming back and being a part of the show. Like I say, for a 40th time, you're one of my all-time favorite people on the planet, let alone guests on this show. So thank you so much for being here and everything you've meant to me in the show over the years. I'm rooting hard for you, my friend. I hope everything works out, and I want to see you out there playing.
Yeah, me too. I'll be working at it. So hopefully I'll get through next week and get a chance to play. I think they're playing at Scioto, which is apparently a really good golf course there in the Columbus area. So I'll be working hard and hopefully get a chance to play some events and do well in the ones that I get to compete in.
I look forward to it. Take care, my friend. All the best to you and Stephanie and the rest of your family. I hope we get this privilege of catching up with you a little bit later on in the year.
Thanks, Chris. I really enjoyed being on with you again.
Take care, Sean.
All right. Take care.
That is the great Sean McKeel, folks. And again, a guy who I absolutely believe is one of the most underrated players in the history of the PGA Tour. Again, going back to what he did, we all know about the 2003 PGA and probably the greatest approach shot on the final hole in the history of major championship golf. But people forget that he nearly won it again in 2006. He finished second to Tiger at Medina, very close to being a 2-time major champion. Beat Tiger that very year in the World Match Play Championship in the first round. Beat Tiger 4-3. How many people get to say that? 20 top 10s, 57 top 25s. a guy who just loves the game and loves being out there week to week, out on tour, being in the atmosphere of major championship golf, a guy who earned the right to be there. So he has done so many wonderful things in our game, and a guy who deserves an opportunity. I just don't understand how, as a major champion, you're not out there on the Champions Tour, all these categories and who qualifies and who doesn't. And certainly I don't understand why the Legends Tour over in Europe wouldn't want a guy like he and Rich Beem in their field. Again, you would want to market the fact that you have so many great major champions in your field. Come see all these great major champions. As we've talked with Clark Dennis over the years, the Legends Tour over in Europe doesn't get much ink. It doesn't get much airtime. You would think you would want to pump up your fields as best you can. That's a head scratcher for me why they're not knocking on his door to get him there, let alone doing the opposite of that. So kudos to Sean for keeping it going and for practicing as much as he does. I really, really hope he gets an opportunity, gets into some fields this year. Hope he qualifies for the U.S. Senior Open. Hope he gets some exemptions. I'm looking forward to watching him play some more really great golf. All right, my friends, it is time for me to put a bow on this episode of Next on the Tee. My sincere thanks go out again to Richard Zokol, Ron Sirak, and Sean McKeel for joining me. Scheduled to join me next time are Champions Tour pro Rob Labritz will be back. We'll get our regular monthly visit from the Confidence Doctor, Dr. Bob Winters. And then we'll round things out with NHL legend Dan Quinn. Danny's so fantastic every time he's a part of the show. Looking forward to catching up with all three of those wonderful friends here next week. So, folks, please come back. You're not going to want to miss that episode. I want to thank our friends again over at Trib Live for being such wonderful partners of the show and for hosting it on their site. For the latest news from Western Pennsylvania and beyond, including your favorite sports, go to triblive.com. You can find the show by then clicking on the Sports Section tab, and right there on the homepage of the Sports Section, you're going to see the most recent episode. Or you can type in podcast.triblive.com, then click on Next on the Tee, and many of the most recent episodes from this season are right there for you as well. But as you guys know, you can find us pretty much anywhere you get your podcast content. We're out there on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, Good Pods, and golfnewsnet.com as well. But folks, like I say each and every week, my biggest thanks go out to each and every one of you for pressing play and for being the greatest supporters in the history of podcasts, bar none. I'm so grateful for each and every one of you. Until next time, hit 'em straight, my friends.
Thanks for joining Chris again this week on Next on the Tee. We hope you enjoyed the conversations as much as we did. Please share the show with your golf buddies and be sure to follow it on Trib Live or your favorite podcast app so you never miss an episode. Thanks for pressing play and being part of the journey. We'll see you next week, right here, where the best minds in golf share their stories.